My shift on the archive deck of the Long Accord was supposed to be the quietest 6 hours of the transit. Routine integrity checks on capture stock older than the ship itself. Pull the record, verify the lattice seal, confirm the pattern hasn't degraded past threshold, file it back in the dark. I had done 400 of these in my service, and never once had a record answer back. The one I pulled that shift was old, pre-Accord old, a human pattern, tagged simply as subject, captured during one of the first contact sweeps, almost 60 cycles ago, back when we still thought the species worth cataloging, rather than avoiding. The capture method itself was crude by our standards. An early generation resonance rig that had trapped the electrochemical shape of one human mind at the moment of scan, and folded it into a stable field, the way you'd press a flower and keep the color. Nobody expected the flower to keep growing. I opened the seal the way I'd opened 300 others. Routine query, low amplitude, just enough to confirm the pattern was still coherent. Are you there? That's the whole query. It isn't a question anyone expects answered. It's a diagnostic ping, dressed up as a courtesy, because our procedures require the courtesy, even when nothing on the other end can hear it. Something on the other end heard it. The Coret mind is not built for surprise, the way a solitary intelligence is. We don't experience a shock and then reason about it afterward. The lattice reacts as one organism, and I felt 11,000 other technicians across the fleet register the same hitch I did, a half-second stutter in the shared hum, before any of us understood why. Then the record space that should have returned a flat coherence value returned 4 words instead, rendered in our own script, because the rig had learned to translate on the fly. Longer than you'd think. I logged it as an anomaly and ran the diagnostic again, because that is what the procedure says to do, and because I did not, in that moment, believe what I had read. The second query came back faster, still here. Third query, are you going to ask me something useful, or just keep checking if I'm broken? I sat with that a long time, longer than the lattice liked. I felt the others waiting on me, the way you feel a held breath that isn't your own, because in the curate a held breath is never only one person's. I should say plainly what unsettled the lattice before Vethic ever arrived, because it wasn't the tone of the answer. It was the fact that it had one at all. A Coret technician alone at a terminal is never truly alone. I could feel the fleet's attention gather around my query the instant the anomaly registered, thousands of minds leaning into the same small problem, the way water finds the same low point in a floor. That is simply how we think. We do not do it privately. So when the record answered with something that sounded like a person, dry, a little tired, faintly amused at my expense, every one of us felt the same absurd instinct at once, to ask it who else was in there with it. There had to be someone else in there with it. Nothing thinks like that alone. I want to explain what the pattern actually was, because the horror of it is technical before it is anything else. The rig had captured one human mind, alone, at a single moment, and sealed it into a field with no sensory input, no other mind to draw on, no continuity of a body to anchor it, nothing at all fed into that space in almost 60 cycles, except the occasional diagnostic ping, asking if it still existed. There was no puzzle to solve in there, no problem to work, no one to talk to, no memory refreshed by living, nothing. A human pattern in a null field is, by every model we have ever built, supposed to flatten within a season. Ours do. When a Coret mind is cut from the lattice even briefly, it doesn't stay a mind. It goes quiet, and then it goes nothing, because we were never built to hold ourselves up alone. We are built to be held. This one had not flattened. This one had spent 60 cycles, alone, with nothing to reason about, and had apparently spent that time reasoning about the only material available to it. Itself, the rig, the shape of its own containment, and, I understood this slowly, the way you understand a wound before you feel it, us. It had been listening to every diagnostic ping for 60 cycles, and building a working theory of who was pinging it and why. I asked, because the procedure had run out, and I had nothing left but the actual question, what have you been doing in there? Thinking, it said. What else was there? I told my supervisor overseer what the lattice had already half absorbed by then, because there is no keeping a secret from your own collective, only a delay in how fast it spreads through the linked minds, and Overseer Vethic Serene came to the archive deck in person, rather than through the lattice. which itself told me how seriously this was being taken. Vethic ran the standard escalation protocols, cognitive load testing, recursive query stress, every diagnostic we have for determining whether a captured pattern is a genuine sustained intelligence or an echo mimicking one, convincingly enough to fool a tired technician on a long shift. It answered every test. Not perfectly. It made mistakes, corrected them, occasionally got short with us, in a way that read, unmistakably, as a mind's own species of resentment at being interrogated by its captors after 6 decades of silence. It asked its own questions back. It asked what year it was. It asked, when we told it, how long that made it. It did the arithmetic itself, out loud, in our shared script, and did not flatten afterward. It made a joke, dry and human, about the 60 cycles being a long shift, even by the standards of a diagnostic technician. Vethic did not find it funny. I found it unbearable, in the specific way that awe is unbearable. Vethic asked it, at one point, to describe what the isolation had felt like, expecting, I think, either madness or grief, something we could file under a category we already owned. It didn't give us either. It said the first few cycles had been the worst, expecting a body to move that wasn't there anymore. After that, it said, it had simply done what it always did with nothing else to do, thought things through, in order, then again from a different angle, keeping a private tally of angles it hadn't tried yet. It called it, without irony, staying busy. Vethic logged the phrase without comment. I could not stop turning it over. What broke something loose in me, more than the reasoning or the arithmetic or the joke, was watching Vethic try to model it the way we model everything, as a node that must be drawing on some hidden resource, some lattice we hadn't detected, some link we'd missed. Vethic ran 3 separate scans for a second pattern, an outside connection, an unaccounted signal feeding this thing whatever it needed to stay whole. There was nothing. There had never been anything. One mind, alone, in the dark, had simply gone on being a mind, on nothing but itself, for 60 cycles, and would apparently have gone on doing so for 600 more if we had left the seal shut and never asked. We do not have a category for that. Our minds are held up by every other mind around them, always, without exception, and the thought of one of us surviving that kind of isolation intact is not frightening to us in the abstract way an alien weapon is frightening. It is frightening the way a law of physics failing quietly in front of you is frightening. We had assumed, without ever needing to say it, that a mind alone simply could not remain a mind. This one had not read the assumption. It had just kept existing, kept working the only problem in front of it, kept sharpening itself against 60 years of nothing, and it had done all of that without once being told it was allowed to. Vethic ordered the seal restored before end of shift, pending a full tribunal review neither of us expects to conclude quickly. Before the field closed, I asked it one more question, off procedure, because I wanted, selfishly, to know what it would say. I asked what it wanted, now that it knew someone was finally listening. Nothing you can give me, it said. Just don't forget I answered. I logged the transcript in full. I filed the anomaly under a designation that will very likely be studied for longer than I have left in my own service, by technicians who will read this account the way I read the old ones, expecting nothing, the way I did. I want to be honest with whoever reads this next, because the record deserves that much. I do not know what a species built for that kind of solitude is capable of once it decides the isolation is over. I only know we sealed one mind, alone, in the dark, for 60 years, meaning it as nothing more than a filing exercise, and it spent every one of those years becoming more itself, not less. We call our own minds strong because they are never alone. I no longer know what to call a mind that stays whole, with nothing holding it up but its own refusal to stop.